Okay, guys, want to welcome you to another edition of Halftime Chat, and I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Sheldon Taylor, and we've got the privilege and honor to be interviewing a legend in the music industry, as Mr. Charles Express Yourself Wright. Um, so it's going to be really great. Sheldon's holding up his book, and it's going to be great just to be able to talk to Mr. Wright just about not just his music but also his journey, because I think for those of us who have of a different generation, we probably have no idea what life was like living in the States in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it's going to be interesting just to hear from Mr. Wright about his book, his music, and a lot that he has going for him. So, Mr. Wright, we want to welcome you. I hope you're doing well.
I am, thank God. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm over here in the US and in the UK. Sheldon, I always think you're in Delaware, but
I am in Delaware. I'm in
he's
Delaware.
Okay.
We cover a lot of territory.
Yes, sir.
And but you know, we always start off because we have an international audience. As I said, where were you born and raised, sir? It gives people a sort of an understanding and a geography as to where you were born and raised.
I was born in the cotton fields of Mississippi.
Wow.
And until I was 12, I was raised there. So I got a good dose of what that's about. And I came to LA when I was 12. My family moved to LA.
Wow.
Yes.
You know, most of us would listen and hear about you know, growing up in the South, maybe based on movies, on TV shows, but for yourself, up to your age 12 in Mississippi, how was that experience for you? I know you've written a lot in your book, but just it'd be interesting just to hear.
Yeah, well, my book explains what I went through. It was hell. My family went through hell. They call it sharecropping, but it's an extension of slavery, basically, where it came from. I'm not trying to sound too drastic, but that's basically the truth. You know, do you know anything? You probably know nothing at all about sharecropping. Maybe a brother in Delaware might.
Sheldon.
But sharecropping is the person that owns the land. He buy the seeds and the fertilizer. You do all the work, and you try your best to come out above board. Unfortunately, you never do. They have it fixed to where they trick you out of everything you think you have coming. And year after year, I saw my father subject to that.
You know, and Sheldon and I were going through reading your book and how you detailed those scenarios about maybe bringing in what was an agreed amount for the day, but then the white landowner saying, nope, you've under delivered, and then you almost like it almost sounds like a record label where where you're always in debt no matter how many albums you sell. It sounds like that.
That's interesting. There's a chapter in my next book called From the Cotton Patch to the Record Field. And it deals with something like that, yeah.
Wow. But I mean, as a child, if you can reflect back, did it seem as if that's how life was? That we are always going to be we're subjected to this kind of life. We're always going to be cheated because of our skin color. I mean, I think, as I said, growing up for me, it's hard to imagine life like that. But what was it like for you as a child, seeing what your dad was going through, what your family's going through? I'm sure the neighbors and everyone around in Mississippi was probably experiencing that. Did it just seem that that's the life and we just have to accept it?
Well, it was just, yeah, it was like that. It was, that's just how life was. We didn't know anything any different. We knew it wasn't good, but we didn't know there was anything what was better. I had no idea. But coming to California, that's a total culture shock. I had no idea, and all the kids out here, when I got out here, they were on another level. I had to catch up with their level of where they were. So I had to pay good attention all the time to make sure that I didn't get lost in the shuffle, because they were on a whole different level. For instance, Halloween. We never celebrated Halloween in Mississippi. And the kids asked me, my first year out here, "Are you going to trick or treating?" I said, "Trick or treating? Yeah, I'm going." Okay, Halloween came. They came by my house. They were all in their attire and uniforms and stuff. "You ready? You going trick or treating?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, where's your uniform?" I said, I don't got no uniform. What do you mean?" So they take a bag and they cut the eyes and the mouth out and stuff, and they put it over my head. And I got more attention than they did, actually.
Now, Mr. Wright, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Going up until you were 12, you were around the Clarksville area in Mississippi.
Yes, sir.
Now, can you share the impact on the children? Because obviously, when you're looking at working the land that you're bound to, it's a family situation where it's the mother, the father, the children. But what happens is the children are denied like access. They can't go to school because that's around the time you got to work in the land and all that stuff. So can you share the impact that it had on young people? Because it affected you going to California. You said you had to catch up. So can you kind of paint a picture of that in that time period as a child working?
Well, fortunately, there's something about the school system that I indulged in Mississippi that was somehow better than the system I fell into when I came to California.
Okay.
The reason I say that is that I knew more than a lot of kids, so for some reason, because I had Black teachers back in Mississippi, and they were really striving, I think, to give us some knowledge. Well, got out here, most of my teachers were white. As a matter of fact, before Ronald Reagan became the governor of California, California was pretty well integrated. He changed all of that.
Wow.
Yeah. But now there's a chapter in my new book about a teacher, Mrs. Anderson. And Mrs. Anderson was a white lady, and she taught us how the Africans came to America. And according to her, some white people went to to Africa to visit, and they stayed a couple of weeks. And then when they got ready to leave, they hoisted this big, beautiful red, white, and blue flag. And some of the natives got carried away and got in their canoes, and they loved this flag so much they followed the ship way out to sea, and a storm blew up. And the captain said, "You better take them on. We're going to take them on." And they took us on, brought us to America. People loved us so much, they said, "Go back and get some more." And that was the extent of what I learned in junior high school at the age of 14.
Wow.
I ended up going to jail at 18. And then I told the guys in jail what I had learned. They were falling all over the floor laughing. Some of them were disgusted, that I believed what I had heard. They had no idea that I was that naive, I guess.
Now speaking of naive, because when you're a young person, sometimes before society imposes its restrictions on us mentally, sometimes we're a young person, we have a free mindset before we become exposed, before we get brainwashed, acclimated to the environment. There's a chapter in your book where there's a story where your father has an encounter, I think it's with Mr. Miles, and they're trying to settle up in terms of what's being owed to your father. And your father challenges him in terms of what he's supposed to get. And then there's a situation where this man is about to strike your father, and then you come up. Can you tell that story?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, Mr. Miles and my father got into a confrontation. It was basically about a car, I think, that my father had sold to this boy that used to work at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Miles wanted to know where his share of the profit was and all of this. Anyway, I snuck up behind them while they were arguing, and Mr. Miles raised his cane like he was going to hit my father over the head with it. And I picked up a stick and I told him, "I dare you, don't you hit my daddy with that thing." And shocked Mr. Miles and my father and everybody. But anyway, I didn't know any better, and didn't care. He was thinking he hit my father. As far as I was concerned. So me and him was gonna have it out. I was only about 6, 7 years old though. So but he was old and shaky, and if I had to, I would have fought him.
Now, and also in that the exchange between your father, the way the society was so bad there, the environment was so bad that this is a transaction between your father and the man who he sold the car to. But then Mr. Miles approaches your father and he tells him, "Where's my profit?" It's almost like a slavery thing. Is that whatever you get, I get. Where's my part? Even though he has nothing to do with the transaction. So to talk to me about the mentality that those people had during that time in terms of controlling Black people.
Well, my father and Mr. Miles was supposed to share everything 50-50. That means all of the expenses 50-50, all the profits 50-50. Of course, he always ended up tricking my father out of his 50% of profits. But he still wanted 50% of everything my father laid his hands on. And he was serious about that. And it didn't make sense to me or my father, I don't think, at the time. It certainly didn't make sense to me. It never has made sense to me what we were going through there. But Mr. Miles was adamant about everything my father got his hand on. He got half of it.
Yeah, that's awful. You know, when you look at that time period. So obviously, when we look at what your future turned out to be, we know what you wound up doing in terms of being in entertainment. But let's say that we play devil's advocate, and you have somebody who never had a ticket out to move to California and to go into a whole different career. What would have been their future? So if they didn't go into music, if they didn't move, if they didn't leave Mississippi, what would have been their future living in an environment like that?
Heaven knows. I don't know. Heaven knows. I mean, you mean still in Mississippi?
Yes. Back during that time. So you were a child of the 30s and the 40s.
It would be a devastating life. I went back there 3 years ago, last time I went back. Now, this is a place, okay, where something as great as the blues was created and been taken all over the world and watered down into all kinds of different names and styles, they call it all, but it all comes from right there. And still, the people there are living so poorly. They have nothing. The problem is they have nothing to do. They used to use us to pick cotton and to plant cotton and to cultivate the cotton and all of that. But now they have chemicals they plant with that cotton and won't nothing but cotton grow. They have a machine that pick probably as much as 10,000 people a day. So all those people that they brought there enslaved to do this work have nothing to do.
Now, talk about the chemicals, because obviously now the people who live in these communities right next to the agriculture, and they're spreading the chemicals around. And talk about how it's like chemical warfare. Talk about
They
that.
probably, I don't know the whole situation, but they more than likely don't give a damn about those people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and matter of fact, they got those people hung up. When I was a kid back there, some things I never saw. This is strange. I never saw a hurricane. They had a little whirlwind every once in a while, but they have hurricanes all the time now. I never saw anything like dope. They got all kinds of stuff now, especially crack, and they got people hung up on that stuff. It's a sad situation to look at. And the Clarksdale, the town that I came from, it was a vital town, but now the houses are leaning in most cases. And the people are sitting around with nothing to do. And I think it probably was better when we had something to do, like even picking cotton, rather than sit around doing nothing.
So you were one of the few, or one of a certain percentage that was able to leave Mississippi, and you went on to California, which is like part of the Great Migration, where a lot of blacks are coming from the South and they're going to different places. And of course, California is one of the places that they land.
Yeah.
So what it was like when you first landed in California?
Well, actually, I was going to run off when I got old enough, at any rate.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Most people leave Mississippi, they go to Chicago, or they go to St. Louis or Kansas City. And I was going to go to one of those places. I had my mind made up. I'm so glad I didn't. I'm glad I landed in California because I've been to those places. And California is a much better deal. What was your question?
Well, you basically answered it in terms of what was it like when you went, instead of going to Chicago and St. Louis, because a lot of times there's a lot of racism that's there. So when you're going to those places in California and all those places, it's you black people are living like really in a condensed environment. But in California, it's a different experience. So what was it like when you landed when you finally got to California? What was it like when you saw it for the first time?
Like I say, when I first came here, Ronald Reagan had not risen as the governor, and California was very well integrated.
Wow.
And I've seen things get from good to worse ever since Reagan got involved. But California was nice. I mean, we were poor. My family was among the poorest of the poor when we came here, but we survived. My father worked as a janitor, and I sold papers and all kind of things that make up for whatever the family needed. We're doing all right. I've been on the road traveling with my band and with some of the acts I performed with down through the years. I've been to St. Louis. East St. Louis scared me. I've been to Chicago. I've been to Kansas City. And as I say, I'm so glad I landed in California. A lot of people don't know California is the second biggest cotton state.
Wow.
Yeah, Mississippi is number one, and California is number two.
So when you arrived in California, this is around early 50s, 51, 52. So now you're arriving during the time when musically a lot of things are happening in California and around the country in terms of Black music. And now you become attracted to it. So talk about now the music aspect of it.
Well, back home, Mr. Miles had convinced my father that the blues is the devil's music. So my father would not allow me to listen to the blues. Only time I heard it maybe twice or 2 or 3 times. Muddy Waters lived directly across the street from my grandmother. Other than that, I was not privy to the blues at all. I came to California and I'm walking home from school, and all these kids are singing these songs. One Miss Julia, Lord, Miss Claudia. Where y'all learn this stuff from? And they had learned it from the radio show, a guy named Honey Hancock, who played all the newest Black music as it came out. So I started listening to that, man. I fell in love with it. And then the first day I went to high school, I sit down to eat lunch outside, and I heard a sound like I'd never heard before. So I got up and wrapped my food, and I went looking for that sound. It kept stopping. I stopped when it stopped till I got around behind the bungalow. 4 brothers was on that back down behind that bungalow singing doo-wop, 4-part harmony. Mm-hmm. Man, that knocked me out. I mean, every day I was there when they came to they rehearsed there every day. When they got there, I was already there, waiting for them. Until one day I heard a singer named Jesse Belvin. You guys know who Jesse Belvin is?
Yes.
Man, Jesse Belvin had the most unique, beautiful voice. So I found his phone number in the phone book, and I went to the phone book and called him up. Mr. Belvin, I want to sing. I want to sound just like you. He gave me a great piece of advice. He said, get your own style, boy, and leave mine the F alone.
Now, for our listeners, it's been so long, they don't know, they may not know who Jesse Belvin is. And Jesse Belvin was a great singer that when you talk about going back before Sam Cooke, before everybody, he was like, I just put it like this, the way people were looking at Michael Jackson at a certain period of time, they were looking at him like that. And as vocalist, he influenced so many, and this is early 50s. This is before rock and roll, the whole thing. He's a guy, he had a nice voice, tenor voice, had great songs.
He
and
brought
people
it to
looked up
LA.
to him.
He brought
Yes,
it to LA. Yes.
and
He's the
he was a victim of the racism within the music business, because during that time, the black singers, they would do these package tours and they would go all over the South and go all these places, and they had to deal with racist white law enforcement and the people. And can you share with the listeners what happened to Mr. Belvin? Because it was something that was very unfortunate that happened to a lot of other singers during that time.
Yeah, there's this place in Little Rock where they had a fence down between the white kids over here and the blacks were over on this side for the concert. And from my understanding, Jesse well, actually,
Is it Jackie Wilson and all of them?
Jackie Wilson, it was his band, and the kids showed up, the white kids showed up late, and they demanded a second concert. And of course, Jackie wouldn't let his band do it, so Jesse didn't do us the second concert. They went out and cut the tires with razor blades, so you couldn't detect the cut. And Jesse and car met another car on the highway at 85 miles an hour each. And it killed Jesse and his wife and his henchman and the driver. They only wanted to survive.
So can you talk about the racism that black entertainers had to deal with, that type of treatment during that time? Because again, this is during the time where a lot of black people are like poor, they're working class, and these singers, they got these Cadillacs, they dress well, they got money in their pocket. The white girls are liking them, when they go into these places and stuff like that. And there's a lot of animosity, a lot of negative energy.
Well, excuse me, but shit's still going on today in a bigger way than it was before, because again, I say what everybody's striving to do is what the people, the Mississippi blues singers was doing. When they first started exposing this music, white folks came out in flocks telling their kids don't listen to this old boogaloo music of the Africans and this and that. But then they couldn't stop it. So now everybody wants to be a part of it. So they call it rock, they call it country, they call it hard rock, grunge rock, garage rock. They get all kind of names, and they're making billions of dollars off of this music. But we're not getting it. Black people are not getting their share of their own stuff. So it's the bigotry goes on and on and on.
Can you talk about the type of condition, like as far as the violence and the type of, because Nnamdi he's a mental health person. He's a mental health professional. So can you share with us, Mr. Wright, how a black person really had to cope mentally with those black entertainers that they got money, they're earning a living doing something that they love, but they go into all these hostile places, but they almost like, you have to balance it out. You have to almost like, quote unquote, know your place. But at the same time, you're coming into an environment where the black people living in those small towns like Clarksdale, they're looking at you like they're motivated, they're inspired. But the way the system is, they don't want these out-of-towners, these entertainers to come disrupt the environment. So can you tell me psychologically how a lot of those entertainers had to be able to really deal with that mentally when they showed up at these places?
Funny thing, one of the groups before the Watch Band was created, I was in 3 different vocal groups and they had hit records. One of the groups I was with, we were in New York doing the Apollo, and the agent called, sent us down to South. And the guys in the group wouldn't go because they were afraid to go down South just because of what they had been hearing. So here I am in New York we're getting disrespected in the first place at the Apollo, and we ain't making enough money to do anything. And they don't want to go to where the money is, and that's down south. But then after I think about it down through the years, it's all the better because they wouldn't know how to act or carry themselves down there. I would have, because I was coming, that's where I came from. But they have no idea what it's like. And sometimes the black woman, the white woman can get you in a lot of trouble. And even if in an innocent way. So I've seen entertainers that are really good, and a white woman come up and kiss them, and that's the end of their career. I've seen that more than once.
Wow.
Yeah.
I get a question that Shell and I had earlier was, being that you've lived from 40s, 50s, 60s, even up to today, what decade would you think was probably, as a black man, was probably the most challenging? I also won't say the worst. It could be the worst, but the most challenging of all. Some of us might think the 60s during the civil rights movement. Some might think the 40s or the 50s or even the 70s. But for yourself, looking back, what decade would you think, as a black person in America, was probably the worst?
You know something? It never ends. It actually never do end. There's a guy now, I don't even want to mention his name, it's Jason somebody. He's got a record out here saying that'll never happen in a small town. And in other words, his song is talking about, so you spit in the police face, kick him in the shin, do this, insult him. And in other words, then hang your ass before you get out of there that day. That'll never happen in a small town. You'll never get away with it. So that's the kind of rhetoric that's still going on. Mm-hmm. And where do you think he got the root of his music from? From us. But he's using it in a very derogatory way towards us. To say, we better not do this in a small town. And he's telling the truth, though. That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, but for yourself, I mean, if you look back, I mean, I don't know if we can only go by images, and most images come from, say, the 60s, but from the 40s and the 50s. I mean, if you look back and thought, wow, the hope is always that it gets better slightly, but but sometimes it kind of might have gone better, got worse instead of getting better.
Every once in a while, it looks like it's getting better. Then something happens all the time. I've been trying to get Warner Brothers to re-release a song of mine called "Candid." I don't know if you guys ever heard that.
No.
That it really deals with the situation in a blunt way, but not a negative way. But they're not going to redo that. But I need that. That song been recorded by Ray Charles. It's been recorded by Della, Reese. Group called Courtship. Les McCann. Few other people. It's one of my songs that people latch on to, but nobody had a hit because it's saying something that's very meaningful. It probably cost me my career.
Oh, why do you say that?
Because I don't know, God put that song in me, and I probably shouldn't have put it out there. And that's not true. I should have put it out there, but I don't think the people will accept it that should accept it.
Now I want to talk about you and your band, because in today's environment, you know, a lot of people of a certain age, they don't know that there was a whole different type of music business, a whole type of environment where before someone actually started making records, they had to develop a stage show. They had to have some sort of musicianship. And before they got signed to record labels, you know, bands like yours, you had to do clubs and all that. So can you share that environment from the time you put together your band and what you had to do leading up to your first record label as the as your band?
Yeah, as I said before the band, I had I was involved with 3 different groups. One group was the Twilighters. We had a big local hit here in LA. And then the next group was the Shields. They had a record called You Cheated, which was number 12 pop record. And then after that, another group called the Galahads. Well, the Galahads was attacked by Alan Freed. I don't know if you guys know who that is.
Yes.
But he put a hurting on us. So the guy who owned the record company asked me to stay on as his A&R director. Well, I hadn't thought of myself as being anything other than a doo-wop singer. But I took the challenge on, and I became an A&R man, and I produced him a hit record, which he needed at that time to get himself out of the hole. And he cheated me just like Mr. Miles did my father. So I left out of there, and while I was doing that, I ran to a band called the La Wilson Band. And these guys were doing routines and they were playing instruments and they were having a lot of fun. So I said, gee, this is what I ought to be doing. So I started me a band. I started with like 4 people, myself and 3 other people. And only added on people who came to play and sit in with us and kept coming back. If they kept coming back, I'd hire them and we split out a little money with them. And until I had 9 people. And then I became a studio musician at the same time. And during the daytime, I would be playing on other people's records. And at night, I'd be playing with my band in the nightclubs. Well, one day, I'm in the band, in the studio with one of the bands I'm playing with, and in walks Bill Cosby. And some guy named Fred Smith gonna produce him. He wants to sing now. He's the hottest actor on television in the world at this time.
Now, what year is this? What year is this?
65, 66. So he wanted to make a record. So we made a record with him 3 weeks later. A record called Little Old Man. I'm sorry. Can you guys give me a second? My TV came on.
It's fine. It's fine. I mean, it is quite interesting just hearing his account of Black America, and especially as a recording artist, well, just generally, and his stuff that I can't even fathom to imagine what it's like. Anyway,
Apologize. Okay, so then we made. You ever hear "Little Old Man" by Bill Cosby?
No. I know he did. I know he did some jazz records. So this is before he was doing the jazz records, right?
Yes, he was trying to do blues.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Little Old Man was spin off of Stevie's Wonder Uptight, became a hit record. Then he wanted to do an album. So I did 3 albums with him. And then he wanted my band to be his band when he performed in nightclubs and wherever. So we became his backup band. And he got us a contract with Warner Brothers. And so that's how we got a record label deal.
Now, along the way, you working in clubs, you doing A&R stuff. So for a lot of our listeners who have a certain age, they're coming up in a time period where a lot of recording artists are making a whole lot of money. But back then, as a working in bands, working in clubs, maybe doing some session work or whatever, what kind of money were you all making back then?
When I was putting that band together, we was making anywhere from $20 to $25 a night. But used to say people making a lot of money. A lot of them appear like they're making more money than they actually are. That's one thing. Another thing is they're not making the real music. And that's the sad part about it, is they didn't give us everybody is taking, like I say, from our blues, they're taking their, and they call it this, they call it that, they call it other, but they still playing those real instruments. Meanwhile, we who have the talent to really make these instruments sing have been handed down an electric keyboard and an electric drum. And we talk about beats, you know, that's really not happening. All these beats and stuff, Africa, this stuff started in Africa. And even the African guys, sometimes they disappoint me. I was in France and these guys had a music convention. And they came and they wanted me to hear that music. And these African brothers were playing some drum machine. I said, man, what are you doing? You guys started this stuff with the real deal. And you're going to go for this drum machine thing? We never thought about it. We never thought about it. I said, man, think about it, please.
Now, you said like you're playing in clubs and you all are making like $25. So you're saying you're splitting $25 amongst 6 or 7 people?
No, we would be making $20 to $25 each. When we add somebody else to the band, we have to kind of split that up so everybody gets something.
So tell me this. So that's happening. And obviously during that period of time, you know, entertainers are not really getting wealthy. You're like a working musician. So what's the mentality during that time in terms of you're playing in clubs? What's the aspiration? Is it more about the next job, or was it what's the mentality?
It's more about this groove getting greater and greater and stronger. And we're getting to be better and better and tighter until we start making money. Then shit hit the fan. Oh, everything, unfortunately, when you start making money, it changes everything.
Now, when you say making money back then, what was making money? Like when you say making money?
I took some guys from making $15 to $20 a night to making maybe $500 to $600 a night, and then maybe $1,000 a night.
Wow.
But it was just too much for them to process. And jealousy came into my band at that point. And then somebody was in there telling how he's getting us. The more we did, the worse it got, I'm afraid. I hate to tell you guys that, but that's what happened with my band.
So can you tell me like the dynamics of groups? Because right now in Black music, we don't have a lot of groups. There's a lot of solo acts. And a lot of times what the industry has done over time, they focused on solo acts and not so much on groups. But tell me about the challenges of being able to keep a group together and working through challenges, the hard times on the way to getting hit records. And then when you get hit records, you still got to try to balance all these personalities. So can you share how you was able to deal with all of that stuff?
It was difficult, to be honest with you. It was fine for a while. Then it got to be like, you take some guys from the middle of the ghetto and you put them out on Front Street and they're on every TV show that exists and they're on the radio all the time. Their brain, they can't deal with that just like that. It takes a lot to be able, that's a lot of pressure. Everybody want to have a big fine car. Everybody wanted, and me personally, I was a businessman. Okay, the guys that got me back in the day made me a businessman. The disc jockeys and the record company people screwed me out of the first money I was supposed to make, made me hard at not letting people take me anymore. So I have my own publishing company. I write my own songs. So I'm looking to my rest of my group like I'm running off and leaving them because I took care of business.
So how did you learn about the business part as far as the publishing? And because you're talking about during a period of time where a lot of black acts, they're taking their publishing. There's a lot of controlling going on. So tell me how you were able to be autonomous like that.
When I was doing independent producing, I did a lot of it out of a studio in Hollywood called American Recorders. It was ran by an old Jewish lady, and she taught me to never give up my property. Yeah, and I respect her today for that. She's been gone, but I respect her for that this very day, and I thank her for that.
So can you tell me like what it was like for artists? Because you were A&R person, so you're seeing this firsthand. So the record company finds somebody who can sing, or they're a good musician, or whatever, and then they sign them to a contract. Tell me what that situation is like that will result in them like losing their publishing and they don't get anything. Can you talk about those scenarios?
I've seen contracts. I've seen Little Richard's contract. I've seen some of my other friends' contract where a company on page 1 gives you this, and on page 2 or 3, they take it all back, and you don't even know they've done it. And that's how they operate. It's the same system Mr. Mile had, basically. But
So,
people don't.
so did you run into any type of opposition? Because normally these record companies and stuff like that, there's a lot of criminal mobsters and all that stuff controlling this stuff. So sometimes they can kind of step in there and try to keep you from that. Because you know what happened to Jackie Wilson? He was the opposite of you. So how were you able to avoid that situation to having someone intimidating you or forcing you to sign contracts that weren't good?
Nobody can force me to write my name. I tried to avoid all of that because I looked out for it. I ran into it still all the time, trust me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're conscious, you don't fall into the trap all the time. I fell into it enough times before. When I wrote Expression Stuff, that time I decided I already owned half of my publishing. I decided I wanted more of it. I wanted to own it all, but I wouldn't let these people administrate it, but I was going to still keep my publishing, which I did. That's the best thing I ever did in my life because Express Yourself is one of the greatest songs of all time as far as commercials and people sampling it and all that kind of stuff. Been over 100 commercials around the world.
So would you say that, like, compared to a lot of people who you came up in the industry with in the late 60s going into the early 70s and throughout, you kind of made out better than a lot of your peers?
I did. I just realized recently how well I did. Now, yeah.
So can you talk about how you set your publishing company up? Because that's a lot of work. That's a lot of administrative work. So for some people, that's not in their wheelhouse. That's not their strength. For them, it's all about creating the music. Like the business aspect of it, they can have a business mentality, but the actual day-to-day activity of managing your publishing, phone calls, and all the legal stuff. Tell me how you kind of got involved in all of that.
Well, actually, I am very blessed. Like I say, I don't have to do that. I let them administrate it.
Okay.
Yeah, I let Warner Brothers administrate it. They powerful. They know what to do. They make sure that I don't get screwed and that they don't get screwed. And all I have to do is sit down with God and collect money.
So it's 50-50. So you own 50% and they own 50%?
No, I own it all.
Oh, you own it all. So when you got your publishing company and you own all of your publishing from the beginning, or you just gradually got it all?
No, I own it from the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you never had situations where with your publishing, people were trying to get you to sell it?
They're trying now. Yeah, they're trying now. I mean, if they could get 10% of what it's worth, they'd be in good chips.
So basically, you were able to do what Michael Jackson was trying to do that he couldn't do, is that he wanted to own all of his, but he didn't live long enough to do it, but you were able to do it.
But he didn't just, Michael Jackson wasn't fighting just for his. I'm not trying to own the Beatles publishing. I'm not trying to own Little Richard's property. All I want is my very own. You know, and that's not too much for anybody to ask for. But he in turn, think about it. He was trying to get the Beatles, well, he had the Beatles published. He had a whole lot of other people's property. What is he going to do with it? I mean, why do he need it? Which is his business if that's what he want to do. But see, I feel like it might have got him into a lot of trouble. And sometimes greed can outdo your need.
So tell me this, with your publishing company, everything you have for your business, do you have like when Prince died? Prince died and he really didn't have a system in place to pass his music down so it stayed in the family. He sold some to family. He left some family members and some of them sold it back to the record company. So do you have a system in place where you're passing your publishing and everything goes down?
I'll try, but I don't think I can. I don't think I can. I think, you know, and that's sad too, because I just don't think it's possible. I've tried to do that already. And, you know, when you die, you lose control of stuff.
Yeah, we come into the road with nothing, and we definitely leave with anything. You know, you touched briefly about writing, express yourself, and for multiple of generations. The remake by N.W.A. in the late 80s, was it probably early 90s, would probably be one of the you know, a song that anytime they talk about N.W.A. or Dr. Dre or Ice Cube, that's the sort of the statement song from them. At the time when you wrote it, what was going through your mind as to what you were trying to communicate?
Well, one night we were performing at a place called Texas A&M College,
Yeah.
and I closed with the song "Do Your Thing."
Okay. It's your okay.
Do your thing. It's your thing is a derivative of do your thing.
Oh wow.
Everybody get on the floor, do your thing. That was a huge record in '67. And I closed with that song that night. And they kept stomping and clapping and stomping. I don't know what made me say it. I said, express yourself. And they went, wow. So I took a pad and a pencil and my guitar, and I went to my room that night and I wrote Express Yourself. Nobody liked it. I took my band in the studio the next week. It didn't work out. So the next weekend, I called my drummer and my bass player and the recording engineer, and I went in and I did the track with just the three of us. And I took it back home and called the band to do the horn section. They didn't want to do it because they thought it was a piece of shit.
Huh.
So I threatened them. I said, I'm going to get some of my old studio buddies. I bet you they'll be glad to play on it. So they mumbled and they played it.
Now I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I took it to the president of Warner Brothers. He said the same thing, as a piece of junk. We were playing at a nightclub when it was released, and I had the first two copies sent there in Detroit. We was owned by a DJ, and I gave him one copy. He went in his office, and he came out and said, I think you made a mistake this time, Charles. Nobody liked Express Yourself. But I knew what it was. Anyway, I'm sorry to cut across your question.
Oh, no problem. No, you answered my question. My question I have for you though is that Express Yourself record, that was like a game changer, because prior to Express Yourself, black music had this, it was really horn driven. It had this like a rough sound. But then when Express Yourself comes out, it's more of a leaner sound, it's more funky, it's more on rhythm. And then that song, after that song, everybody who's coming out after you is kind of like doing that style. Where you look at Sly and the Family Stone, the Ozzy Brothers, they got a record, It's Your Thing, kind of in that same vein. It's really funky, a lot of rhythm. So talk to me about how that record that you had changed the direction of black music.
Now you're telling me something I don't know.
Because the style that you had before, it was just Otis Redding, that whole Stax. It was real pounding with the horns. And then you all are coming along, and it's the emphasis on the rhythm section. It's almost like a newer sound. So when you look at what like Sly and the Family Stone is doing with Stan and all those other type of records, that wasn't done until you all were doing what you were doing. That style, it was more funky, it was more leaner, you know.
Yeah, well, I had the Isley Brothers approach me several times, telling me that they ripped me off. And War, Ohio Players, Cool Gang, all these guys, they tell me that they got their stuff from me. I don't know how they did or what they did. I just go with it.
Yeah, what they did was that Again, yours was the emphasis on rhythm and the new stuff. It's almost like James Brown, like Papa's got a brand new bag, and then it's James Brown with the big payback. It's like two different styles. So
Yeah.
you're like in between, and all those other groups, they're hearing that record. And then and it's funny because all of those groups that you just named, Kool and the Gang, Ozzy Brothers, and the other group, they went on to become huge. They went on to become really, really huge. And your record is like the inspiration.
Yeah, not just them, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yes. And you even had one of their guitar players that they got.
That one of my guitar players was backbone of what they were doing. Yeah.
So when you look at the record September, by everyone knows September by Earth, Wind, and Fire. The guy who's playing the guitar on September, the guitar that starts the record off, his name is Al McKay. He comes out of your band.
Yeah, I taught him how to play rhythm.
Wow.
Al was playing like Jimi Hendrix when I first met him. But I taught him how to play that. I learned that rhythm pattern from Adolph Jacobs. Adolph used to be the Coasters guitar player. He was a hell of a rhythm guitar player. And I learned how to play just by watching him because I never had a lesson. I'm left-handed. Wouldn't nobody teach me how to play.
So then a lot of your band members, eventually they went on to go play with Bill Withers. And once again, when we talk about sampling, a lot of records that have gone on to become sampled from Bill Withers. For example, there's a record, No Diggity. That was his record, Grandma's Hands. But the guys who are playing on Grandma's Hands, that's your band.
That's my
Those were
band.
your guys.
Bill stole my band. He hung around me. I was supposed to be producing a record on him. And he's all the while, he hung around. Next thing I know, I'm looking at on TV and there my band is with him. Anyway, God bless him.
I mean, as we come full circle here, what inspired you to write the original autobiography that that you have out? What was the inspiration for writing that first? Because you have now said you're doing a follow up.
I've been writing my memoirs down for 40 some odd years, and I figured I should try to at least put it out in the book. So now I'm almost through with my second book, which is entitled Express Yourself. And it'll be out in the next few months. And I'm doing the audio book right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
What should we expect from that?
They tell me it's going to be the bomb. The people working on it with me tell me that at least. So we'll see.
So the team that you have working with you, obviously, you got a lot going on. You got your publishing. Your publishing is still very lucrative. You're writing books. So as far as putting the team together that you have to help you with this, are they younger people? Are they people your age? Are they family members?
They're younger than I am. Matter of fact, I have a single out now, believe it or not.
Okay.
You guys haven't heard it? Your Hand?
Yes, I was writing it up here. Monique did send a copy, and that was my next question is what inspired you to it's a blues singer, but what inspired you to go back into the studio?
Well, I'll never really leave the studio. I mean, I'm always doing something. But I feel like my father's philosophy concerning the blues caused me to cheat myself out of the blues, and I'm listening to some of the blues players today, and they're performing with electric drum and electric keyboard. I feel like I ought to do some real blues. So hopefully they can get back on track and we can reclaim our legacy.
Yeah, I mean, okay, and we for some of us, when we listen or hear about the blues, it sounds music written out of pain and highlighting suffering. But and I guess this is the like you mentioned your dad had a view about the blues which puts you off, and I think for some generations, like, yeah, man, the blues sounds like when you're low and down, you just talk about the my wife's left with my best friend, and you just play strung on your guitar. That's the impression of the blues. So it's like when you're in a good spot, why would you listen to the blues? But from your experience and from your history and from actually now re-recording, how would you really define what would be the blues?
I disagree that the blues is something that's down. The blues actually, the same feeling you get with the blues is the same feeling you get when you go to church. It's the same thing. It's Black folks' music. We have something God gave us that we brought here from Africa that we've given to the world that is actually beautiful. People wouldn't be picking on it if it wasn't. They wouldn't be wanting to feel it. It's a feeling. It's more than just a sound. It's a feeling, and everybody can't reach that depth of feeling. So I thought myself. I thought I kind of got into it with your hand, and we'll see how y'all feel about it. It's getting up in the blues charts already.
So tell me this: as far as this new single and you going in the studio and recording, are you working with new musicians, or are you working with some of your colleagues and your peers from years ago?
Frankly, I do it all except for the drum myself, because I have my colleagues that I use to make records with all the time. But like in this case, I decided I wanted to feel authentic all the way. So I took it up on myself to do it myself. And I'm very happy with it.
So you're in this day and age, you're an independent artist, but you're an independent artist. You control your business. You own your publishing. Now there are a lot of young people who want to get into the music business, and you're in a unique situation because people know your music, but they don't necessarily know you. But in reverse, a lot of younger entertainers, they're famous. People know them, but they don't control their music. So if you had to give some advice to someone that's looking to get into the music business, we know that it's changed with the streaming and everything, but can you share some advice on what they need to do? 3 things that they would need to do to be able to not just get into the music business, but be able to make a living in the music business long after like the popularity is gone and the hits are gone.
First thing I would tell any musician or anyone who wants to be in the industry is to go get some theory and learn how to play real music. Until you do that, I have nothing else I can say to you, because if you're out there faking and shaking, you're not going to really make a total impression. I mean, you might. I look at the other day. I'm looking at the news, and they had some guys on that did the rap in the '80s and the '90s and stuff, and they was bragging, but they couldn't show me no substance. We need some people who are doing real music that reach down in your soul instead of coming up with these so-called beats that is I can't explain what I think it is because it to me I had to turn it off. Learn how to play some real music, then we can talk.
Okay,
And
so that's one. So what's the other two things advice you could give them?
well, if you negotiate with somebody, fine. You negotiate your music with somebody, you're publishing or whatever. You don't have to be greedy and have it all. Take half of it if you can, and run with that. That's the second thing I would tell somebody. And number three, where you want to know,
What's the third piece of advice you can give them?
learn how to really perform. You know, if you're gonna go out there and do music in the public and you want to sell your music, learn how to perform well enough to sell it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
put your heart into it.
And I guess that goes to the first point when you do learn to perform, and I guess it also gets to the point of what is are you in it for the money and fame, or is it do you really actually love the craft of being a recording artist, just singing and performing? And if you didn't get paid for it, would you still be singing? And I guess that's
I,
where people.
I tell all my musicians and friends, money is not the first thing you strive for. Money will come if you do your job. Money will come if you do try to do something to enhance the human spirit. It ain't gonna come just because you want money. You gotta want more than money. You gotta want to do something for the people.
Yeah. I mean, we've really been blessed by your journey, your story. Um, I know that you've got your single, Your Hand, that's out now, um, and it's available on all streaming platforms. If you just search, even on YouTube or Google, Charles Wright, Your Hand, you'd see it come up. Question that, and also your book that's out there now. Um, it is Shed. What's the title of it?
The title is up from where we've come.
Up from yes. And one of the things about the book is that it gives a very vivid description of living and growing up in segregated America, which, as I think, it's still so much untold stories, personal experiences that it might still be hard for us to hear and understand. But the more we hear it, I mean, if you think about most countries would keep talking and pushing stories about World War I or World War II, but sometimes our own stories, our black journeys and stories, seem to get marginalized and almost captured in just one element. And sometimes, if you don't really understand how the past, it's hard to understand how we can make changes in the future if you haven't negotiated how things in the past are still creeping in today. So it's really an important and powerful book, and so we definitely look forward to the follow up. Express yourself when that is due. Hopefully by Christmas
Or before.
or before Christmas. Okay, or before Christmas.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Wright, can you tell us where all our listeners where they can get this book? Once again, the book is called Up From Where We've Come by Mr. Charles Wright.
Go to Amazon. Go to Amazon.com. It's the easiest way to get it.
Yes.
I've read the book. The book is very good. Once again, I really salute you because as we know what's happening in America, they're getting rid of all of our history. They're banning books. They're doing all of these different type of things. So we have a book. This is not about somebody who lived 150 years ago. This is somebody, you know, who lived in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, 60s, and went on to impact the next three generations of music. And he was able to actually survive that. It's a very, very powerful story, the first in a sequence of stories that he's going to put together. So I really encourage, if you're wondering what it's like for someone to grow up in a certain environment and to be able to survive that environment, I encourage you to check this book out. And then the last question I have for you, Mr. Wright, is how have you been able to mentally make peace as someone that's coming up on their 80s, to where you experienced so much during that time, but you've been able to kind of mentally keep it together? Unlike a lot of people, they might have turned to drugs and alcohol and all these different things to cope. What was your secret?
Music.
All right.
I love music and I love people.
I mean, that's really powerful, and goes as a testament as to why you can still be making music today, and still be blessing us with that. Before we go, we tend to like to ask our guests that maybe, and this is more so, all-time favorite film. You know, if you were in an elevator and you had to kill out 2 or 3 hours watching a film to keep you entertained, what's your all-time favorite movie?
One of my favorite movies is 2001 Space Odyssey.
Goodness, Stanley Kubrick.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
I watched it 13 times.
My goodness.
So what moved you about 2001 Space Odyssey?
Everything. It was actually a little ahead of its time. To be honest with you, you know what? My girlfriend and we smoked a joint one night. And we were walking up Hollywood Boulevard. And I saw that poster for that movie and had no idea what the movie was really about. And walked in there, man. That movie and another movie named Westworld.
West, yes.
Yeah, we're playing that night in the same theater, man. I was well entertained, let me tell you. I went down there, my head was spinning. What I liked about it is the details they showed, the instruments and stuff, and Hal, the robot, actually would try to take over the ship. I mean, I read the book about how they made the movie. I've done everything. That movie, that Stanley Kubrick is deep.
Yeah, I mean, we're worried about AI technology taking over now. I mean, so those are very much above. You know, he spoke about things ahead of time, and that's what's where people look at Hollywood as striking, because they're afraid of AIs taking over their jobs. So they're like, look, we need to protect ourselves. So
yeah.
The other question we ask our guests is, of not your song, but of any song, what would be your favorite song by anyone else but other than yourself?
You know, I just heard a song that I'm listening to daily right now. Like I used to listen to music when I first started hearing records. And it was done in 1964 by a guy named Richard Caden. And the name of the song is You Look Like a Flower.
Okay.
It's the most beautiful doo-wop song you want to ever hear.
Wow. Okay. Is it? We'll definitely look out for that. So we have been blessed. Just as we leave, we've got the book available up from where we've come out on Amazon. New single out, Your Hand. If you just search on YouTube, Google, all major streaming services, you'll be able to get that. check out look Express Yourself, which would be the follow-up book, which would come out probably around Thanksgiving or so in November. And if you even search up Express Yourself, when I listened to it, I just listened to it just before we came on, and I was like, today most artists would get a back, they'll re-record the vocals, but it feels as if they just took your vocals and the whole thing and just played it. Or am I wrong? Did they re-record it, or did you guys perform on the N.W.A version, or was it they took the record and just played over it?
On N.W.A,
Yes.
yeah, I'm kind of insulted about that. That's me singing. In the video, they have a tone law playing my part. They could have called me. They didn't. Matter of fact, they did a movie. Everything they do, they leave me out of it.
Wow.
And I feel like they kind of glossed over me.
Well, one of the things is that that collaboration thing is that obviously you grew up in a time where in collaboration always will exist in music, but when you're talking about live instrumentation and all these different type of things, collaboration is a must. So now when you coming into electronics and sampling and stuff like that, a lot of these people are sampling your music, but they don't know who you are. They don't know if you're still living. And that's the mentality. And I think a lot of it is they're not doing it out of spite. They just don't know the history. They don't know, or they don't value it. I can say that. They either don't know it or they don't value it, because I understand what you're saying. A lot of artists.
That's 40 years ago.
Yeah. A lot of artists are like, they just don't have a clue. A lot of artists have said that. Hey, I'm still here. I'm still making music.
Yeah.
I'm here. So I understand.
Yeah.
And that's what we're disconnected from history. And again, normally our listeners are younger. They may be in their 30s and 40s, and a lot of music that we focus on is a lot of music during a period between like the late 80s going into the early 90s. But us knowing who you are and us respecting you, we felt it was very important for you to come on our platform, knowing you just more than express yourself, but knowing that your talents have spawned, have impacted other groups, other types of other formats of Black music. You go from blues, you got doo-wop, you got R&B, you got funk, you got rap music, and you talk about you doing everything. So you could say, hey, you're the Prince, you're the Quincy Jones of your time. You're the, because you were doing these things. The business aspect of it, the entrepreneurship that we talk about nowadays, we kind of take for granted. You were doing that 50 years ago, so it's important for people to know your history and understand they just didn't wake up and they didn't make this up on their own. Other people were doing it beforehand, which is why we got you on our platform. So we're glad that you took the time to be with us, to spend this time for us to reflect on your wonderful career, your talents, your influences, your book, and your new song.
I really appreciate you guys appreciating my book. I appreciate you acknowledging my book.
Yeah, well,
it's our pleasure.
Yeah, it definitely is, and as I said, it's about history, and there's so much of our history that's not told, and it's great that we are getting it put in perspective. And as I said, the links between what you witnessed with your dad and what many artists of the '90s tell us about their record label, it just seems just poetic that it hasn't changed, and it seems as if life just revolves and it still keeps going on. But the more times we hear, the more times we can get ourselves educated, and the more times we can get teachers who are going to tell us the truth instead of embellishing slavery as if it's some fairy tale of somebody just deciding to follow a flag and sail across the world willingly. So so we appreciate what we're listening to, and hopefully, as I said, it's in the description, guys. The link to the Amazon so where you can get the book, and also even the YouTube channel where you can listen to his new blues single. But so we appreciate your time. We appreciate taking the time to speak to us and going down memory lane, and hopefully, yes, we'll look out when the follow up book is out to make sure we let the community know so they can support it as well.
Okay, I have a new single coming out at pretty quick too. I'm gonna keep throwing them at you. Everyone doing it on the floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. No,
Is it a
we
blues record? Blues record? R&B? Is it blues, funk? What is it?
Listen, they probably try to keep throwing me in these categories. I make music.
Okay.
Yeah, and I try to make good music.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't care what you call it.
we'll definitely be sure to let's look that up as well. But
Yeah.
thanks for taking time to speak to us, and we'll be sure to make sure that that we'll as I say, we'll keep pushing the book and as well as the new single now and the one that's coming up shortly as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you
All
very much. Okay. Okay. Well, Sheldon, yeah, it's really good that we did get a chance to interview him, but also it's just, I guess it's hard to, sometimes you watch a TV show, you watch a film, and you see them depict life of the 40s and the 50s, and not realize what it's really like. So to hear his journey, and the fact that he's still making music and is still being able to just persevere, it's just a really awesome experience.
I love the fact that he owns his publishing, so he has a comfortable life. He's not like a lot of artists trying to find lawyers and trying to get your publishing back. He had the foresight to hold on to it. And in his 80s, he's living a comfortable life. He's making music not because he has to make a living. He's doing it because he's creative. And then it's not by coincidence when he said his favorite movie was 2001 Space Odyssey, because that movie came out, I guess maybe early 70s or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's about the future. So when you look at him, even though he's in his 80s, going into his 80s, he has a youthful, optimistic outlook towards life.
Yeah.
Which is something that we all can learn in terms of just being creative. That sustains him. He doesn't put himself into different type of blocks. So, I hope the listeners, this is not, like you said, one of the, contemporary artists, but this man has a story that's it's valuable, and they need to really do themselves a favor to check the platform out, check his book out, and really respect him, because the artists who are making music now, what are you going to be at 70 and 80 years old?
Yeah.
You see all these other artists selling their publishing. This guy's still holding on to his. These people are selling theirs 100%. Yeah, they're getting millions of dollars, but this guy's like, hey, you know what? I'm good where I'm at. And it's a lesson to be learned, is that you don't have to have everything. You can have your own empire and still be able to maintain, So a lot of lessons, a lot of jewels there, man,
Definitely.
in this interview.
Definitely. Okay, guys. Well, appreciate it. We on our New Jack Swing R&B channel on Sunday. We have Sheldon, Stevie Street, and myself will be counting our top 10 favorite albums between 88 to 92, 93. And then on Monday, Walter Mucho Scott, who was part of Teddy. Well, he was with Basic Black, and then also part of Teddy's production team. He had a group called 911 is coming on live as well. So lots to look out for. But thanks to guys for checking in and supporting the interview that we had with Mr. Charles Wright.